So don't get me wrong, I really like the PlayStation Vita. Especially when it came out, I have to say I sunk more hours than anyone should on the device, and I love the fact that it was portable and it could play great games, but ever since I saw that first Nintendo Switch commercial, all I could think of was, this is, on one hand, the perfect console for me, but on the other hand, it's exactly what the PlayStation Vita was trying to do, but done correctly. And in this video I just want to kind of tell you why that is, and also feel free to disagree with me. I know this is kind of one of those topics where everyone has their own opinions and you're all entitled to your own, so let me know in the comments below what you think to this. But with that being said, let's get started. So think back to when the PlayStation Vita was being originally marketed. The way it was sold to consumers was, you can now play your games on the go and at home. These sort of big AAA titles, that's how it was advertised at least. And then you think to the Switch, it's exactly the same, except Nintendo has implemented the idea better. So you have to give the Vita credit of being more portable. It's slimmer, less chunky, but the problem is just that it's still not portable enough for it to make a difference. The fact of the matter is the Vita is still too big to fit in your pocket, and so if you're gonna carry it in a bag anyway, there's no difference between that and the Switch. On top of that, one of the main reasons for the death of the Vita was those expensive memory cards. Sony bundled next to no storage in with the Vita itself, and you could end up spending up to $100 just to get enough storage. The Switch on the other hand has 32 gigs, which is not fantastic, but at least you can use standard SD cards, so it'll be pretty cheap to upgrade your storage. So Nintendo has also nailed the hardware. With the PS Vita, I think it just released a few years prematurely. I mean, the screen, for example, people were already using 720p smartphones, 1080p phones were just around the corner, and the PS Vita has a sub-HD display, which, okay, it was just about acceptable when it released, but now it's horrible to look at in comparison. And especially with the new PS Vita 2000, they replaced it with an LCD panel which is just not as bright, not as colourful, not that great. So yes, the Switch also has a pretty stretched screen, but it's just enough of a resolution having a pure HD standard that it doesn't feel like you're compromising. And that's the big deal when it comes to the PlayStation Vita and the reasons I think it failed. On top of that, the Joy-Cons are amazing. I mean, they're not quite as spaced out as a PlayStation 4 or an Xbox One controller, not quite as comfortable, but they're really clever. The things you can do just by having a controller that splits into two is crazy. The idea that just by having the console with you, you've automatically got two-player games wherever you go. You know, the kickstand, the ability to sort of set the Switch up in a park and play console-quality games, multiplayer is revolutionary. That's something that I've always wanted to do, but never been able to. And the fact of the matter is I've discovered something pretty cool about Joy-Cons. So I was playing Legend of Zelda, I invited my cousin over to play with me, and basically I held the right controller, he held the left one, and we were both playing the game at the same time. I was controlling some parts of the movement and action and him controlling the others. And it might sound ridiculous, but this is honestly the most fun I've had playing the game ever. I mean, you've got to coordinate between your partner, you shout at them when they get it wrong, vice versa, and I think you need to try it to realise actually the possibilities this opens up. That was just one example of something you can do with it, which you've just never been able to do before, and it was quite weird. And in terms of replicating the sort of functionality of the Switch, PlayStation, they implemented remote play, which ended up just kind of half-heartedly doing what the Switch can do properly. It works, but I mean, if you sort of head out more than 10 meters from your room, connection breaks up, and it ends up being a bit of an annoying experience. On top of that, the buttons don't map properly between the PlayStation Vita and the PS4, so you end up using the back touchscreen to try and control things, which is really confusing, really slow, and if you try and play multiplayer online, the latency just kills you. Whereas with a Nintendo Switch, you are physically taking the identical controls, the identical console, anywhere you go, so that wouldn't actually be a problem. So don't get me wrong, the PlayStation Vita had a lot of great games. Killzone Mercenary, Assassin's Creed Liberation, Borderlands, really good titles, and it's nice to see them running on a portable. And I mean, if you do compare it to other portables in the market, fine, it's great, it was much better than the PSP. Graphically speaking, it was way better than the 3DS. But the point is that Nintendo Switch has managed to pitch itself against both markets and still hold its own. So when you're playing on the PlayStation Vita, I couldn't help but notice that every game did feel in some way limited. So whether it was just the small cartridge capacity for the games, which meant that you just get less of a game in each game you buy, or the fact that levels had to be smaller just because obviously you can't have the power to render entire open world environments. In every single game you play, it could have been the controls, the thumbsticks don't feel quite as good as their traditional consoles. They felt like there was some sort of thing holding you back, and it never quite felt like the full console experience. So over to the Nintendo Switch, I mean, I've played 1-2 Switch, I've played Zelda, I even gave that weird game called Snake Pass a go, which, I mean, okay, as a game itself, it's a little bit dull, but it's quite a good demonstration of what the Switch is capable of. These games don't feel limited. These games feel every bit as good as, you know, somewhere between the Xbox 360 and the Xbox One games in terms of graphical fidelity and sort of open worldness, but that's enough. That's enough to not feel limited by the hardware that you're playing it on. That's enough to feel amazed when you're playing it and holding it in the palm of your hand, and it's also enough to hold its own when you whack it onto a big screen. I mean, playing Legend of Zelda behind me on a 4K monitor, I tried comparing it to Horizon on the PlayStation 4, and clearly there is a huge difference, but both can still impress in their own ways. I mean, don't get me wrong, not every game you play on the Switch is going to be beautiful, seamless, gorgeous, immersive like Zelda is. 1-2 Switch is the perfect example of a terrible, terrible game. I mean, it's so bad that you can honestly enjoy playing it just to laugh at the game. But the fact of the matter is that it only really takes one game like Legend of Zelda to show you what the console is capable of. So yes, the Nintendo Switch is great. I think it's in a good market position. It's great hardware, great potential, but there are definitely some things Nintendo needs to do to kickstart the engine. So in terms of the software front, they really need to get the ball rolling. You know, even compared to the PS Vita, a practically dead portable console, its social functionality is lacking. You know, the fact that there's barely any online infrastructure, it almost feels like the console is in a beta release right now. They need to get some apps going to at least look comparable to the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, to be able to at least look like they can start to offer some of the same functionality that those consoles do, to be seen as an alternative to them. And I mean, they also need the games. I don't think I've ever seen a console launch with so few titles, only one of which, to be honest, is really worth buying. That's poor. I mean, Nintendo needs Pokemon, they need Mario, they need to get these titles out fast. And I mean, I think crunch time is Christmas. If after that Nintendo doesn't rescue this sort of dire game library, then even though the Switch has got great potential, just like the PlayStation Vita, it could just die. And the last thing which has always confused me about Nintendo is, why don't they have trophies? Or some sort of equivalent? I mean, it would probably take a coder 10 minutes to implement into their system, and automatically every player who sort of wants to have extra incentives to play a game will do that. You could probably notice a 10 to 15% increase in people's playtime on their consoles just by that 10 minutes of code. It makes no sense to me, and to be honest, me personally, trophies on the PlayStation Vita were part of the reason I enjoyed replaying those games, so I have no idea why they don't have that. So guys, I've probably missed some things, but those are kind of my overall overarching opinions of the two consoles and where I stand with the Switch, which is very, very good right now. So let me know down in the comments below what you guys think to this. I'd like to start a bit of a discussion and hear your guys' opinions. I'll be down in the comment section below for a while after this video releases. So yeah, with that being said, I'm Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'm signing out.